Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Steve. Nice to catch up with you here at Web Summit.
Likewise, and thank you all for having me.
It seems quite strange to sit on stage and talk to a veteran of industry when you still have a baby face, but...
I know. Usually I'm hiding behind a computer screen.
Your company, you launched it back in 2005. Since then, Reddit has remained largely unchanged. Now, at the time, it was designed to be the front page of the internet. Times have changed since then. We're now in an era where internet users have an average about 5 social media accounts. Google is so dominant in search that it's a verb in dictionaries. Is a front page old news in this day and age?
I think you need a home. People need a home online, a place where they can go and be a part of a community and find things that they're interested in. So yeah, sure. But I admit that maybe the analogy of a front page, actually, now many of our users have probably grown up not ever actually seeing a front page. So maybe our words there can change. But I think as a destination, of course, that makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot changing, and we've got a slide to show the audience a first look at what you've been working on. We'll try and cue this up for you, but effectively we've got a demonstration of what you've been working on. Let's press the clicker and take a look at it, and you can explain it.
Let's see if this goes. OK, so this is actually Reddit as it is today. And it's actually, as Reddit has been, this is one of our communities, all, which is dedicated to basically pictures of cute animals. Really hard-hitting stuff. And the interesting thing about this is that it's a picture, or it's a community dedicated to pictures of cute animals, but it's basically a wall of text. So it's not exactly ideal. And so what we've been working on all year is redesigning Reddit. The website has not changed significantly in 5 or 6 years. And so we've been hard at work on this, and we're shipping this stuff in front of real users over the next couple of months. So it's an exciting time. So this next slide, this is actually one of the views of the redesigned Reddit. So as you can see here, actually not a ton has changed. And so part of the strategy here is have a smooth transition for our users. But things get more interesting when we look at the different layouts. So for example, this is what we call the card view. And so this is a more visceral view of the same content. And the nice thing here is now, when I talk about pictures of cute animals, you can actually see a cute animal.
So the look from the get-go looks a little bit like Facebook. Was there an influence in what social media has done? Were you trying to bring that into the web? Because users are familiar with that these days. Yeah,
I'd say yes and no. I mean, we always, when we make any product decision, we want to make sure that whether that product exists or is familiar or not, that we come to the conclusion of what we're going to build based on first principles. So what's the most appropriate for what we're doing? But of course, I think with any product decision, you always look around what's in the market, what works, what doesn't, how can we improve it. I mean, for us, I think it really comes down to if we have a community of pictures, you should be able to see the pictures.
There's been missteps in the past by rivals who've tried to do the same thing. Back in 2010, Dig, social news aggregator, lost about a quarter of its users. Many migrated to Reddit. Yeah, so I guess you're aware of this. How do you manage the process so you take some of those loyal users with you and pick up new ones?
Sure. I mean, that Dig redesign day was one of the happiest days of my life. But what they did is a lot more than change the UI. So what we're trying to do is make Reddit more welcoming, make it more clear what it is, so people on their first time visiting Reddit can actually see what we're all about. We're not changing the fundamental mechanics of the site. So users will still submit content, they'll still choose the content, and all of those things will be largely unchanged. And that's really what makes Reddit work.
There are a lot of people building platforms here. You've done a lot of work behind the scenes on how people consume information these days, what's relevant for designing websites. What jumped out to you, and what advice would you give those in the room who are doing the same thing?
What advice would I give to people designing websites? I think really the way we think about it and the way I've always thought about it is very simply build something that you would want to use. And hopefully, kind of by extension, that people want to use. Solve a real problem. I think one of the challenges people have when they're building things for the first time is not understanding their own motivations. You know, they're trying to build a big company or they're trying to make a lot of money, but they forget, I think, the the most important thing, which is create value for somebody, right? Create something that people actually want to see and be a part of. And then the business fundamentals hopefully follow from that.
I'm not the tidiest person in the room, but I must say Reddit had a little bit of clutter to it.
Yes, if I may. So, well, we lost the slides. Oh yeah, okay, here's a great example. This is the page you would go to on Reddit today to submit content. And the fact that Reddit gets millions of submissions a day through this form is, I don't know, it's a miracle of the internet, and it's a little embarrassing. So, for us, a huge opportunity to clean it up.
But you don't want it too clean, do you?
Well, so this is actually the argument we've been having a lot in the company, is Reddit has always been imperfect, right? And not necessarily by design, but there is, I think, an authenticity in the rough edges. And so, but I often tell the team, Reddit did not succeed because we have a bad UI. Reddit succeeded despite having a bad UI. And so we are free to clean that up, but I don't want it to be perfect. And so one of the things we said very early on in the redesign process was, Reddit can be good, but we'd still like it to feel old. We'd still like it to have that that handmade, authentic feel to it. And so as we go through these designs, one of the challenges is every once in a while we see it and we're like, this is too clean. Like, chop it up a little bit. At least make it feel a little familiar to our users.
There's plenty of imperfections out there in social media, and we've seen that lately. Offensive content, fake news, brand safety issues. As you redesign a bigger website, and I believe you're targeting about 1 billion users eventually, how do you conquer some of the challenges that come with scale?
Sure. I think one of the most important things to remember there is, yes, we see people misbehave online, on Reddit and everywhere else. But one of the lessons I've learned on Reddit is that when you put people in the right context and you strip away their motivations associated with their job or their real-world identity and let them really be themselves, people are a lot more interesting than you think, funnier than you think, collaborative, generous. And so what we always try to do is make sure that we are putting people in that context so they can be their best selves. And so, yes, there's misbehavior, but that's generally in the minority. And it's very important to us that we make the voices of various groups on Reddit, the volume of their voices proportionate to the size of the audience. Because I just generally think people, not just Redditors, but people are fundamentally good and interesting. And if you give them an opportunity to do so, they will be.
It's a nice positive perspective, but we've seen a lot of political reactions, and we just heard a conversation on stage about the Trump factor, how elevated emotions are in this political cycle, not just in the States, you see it in Europe. So even though you say it's the minority, it's still very important to influencing decisions. So how do you make sure it's not the wrong content that people are consuming when they're trying to make key political decisions?
Okay, so when we're talking about politics, things are a little bit different. I still think people are fundamentally good, but yes, we live in a very tense time. And we live, if we're talking about, US politics and worldwide politics, there's, I think, a big tension and potentially a growing tension between people who feel a part of the system and people who feel left behind. And where do these people find their voices and their views, and how do they communicate? So I think what's very important for us is making sure that we're not creating echo chambers, is something we think a lot about. And so one of the nice things about the way Reddit works is, yes, we have pretty much every viewpoint. And when we're talking about politics, there can be a lot of tension between those viewpoints. But you cannot be on Reddit and not see people who have different opinions from you. Which means, on one hand, you may get offended from time to time, but on the other hand, that kind of forced perspective brings empathy along with it, that I think is tremendously important.
Artificial intelligence used by a number of the big social media sites is almost amplifying the echo chamber. Getting to know the user means that you know what content that they like, so you try and feed more content that they like to those users. How do you break the echo chamber, and how do you think social media eventually gets to the point where they can sort of crack what they have created?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So you have these machine learning algorithms that have effectively, I think, optimized to a local maximum, right? And so they've gotten so good at giving you the content they that you want that you don't see other things. Now, on Reddit, things behave a little bit differently, right? Because we have communities, users are doing most of the choosing, and so you do see a big variety of content. That said, relevancy and increasing relevancy is a big effort of ours right now. To make sure when you go to Reddit, you see content that is interesting and engaging to you, right? Because we want people to have a good time and to find stuff that's interesting to them. So if you get really good at relevancy, yes, you can also say, yes, you're getting really good at creating an echo chamber. But I would also point out that my experience on other sites, and probably matches your all's, is that seeing the same content that's like diabolically chosen just for you actually gets a little boring and does get a little stale and repetitive. So I think we'll see an evolution of these algorithms over time because I think variety is the spice of life, and you want to see interesting things, and you want to see other perspectives, and we want people to have that experience as well.
When it comes to tackling offensive content, you tried a quarantine, almost a ring fencing or a filter to try and screen out some of the offensive material. How did that work, and what did you learn from that process?
So quarantining was a strategy. So when I returned to the company 2 years ago, we had a number of communities that were really bad, toxic in a variety of ways. And the only tool we had to use back then was banning communities. And we weren't very good at it yet either. We have gotten a lot better at it over the years. And so what we started doing is creating just basically putting more tools in our toolbox, other ways we can combat these things. And so one of the tools we built was quarantining, which doesn't ban a community, but it basically delists it from our public listings, delists it from search, takes off a lot of their images, because we had these communities that would put nasty stuff deliberately, screenshot it, send it to the press, so the press would be like, hey, look at this horrible stuff on Reddit. And so I was like, well, we can prevent that. Now, over the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot better. Our content policy is a lot more clear. Our community trust and safety and anti-evil teams are a lot bigger. And we have a lot more ways of actioning specific users that has been actually more effective. So we haven't actually used the quarantining tool in a little while because we've gotten so much better at community management, taking care of specific users. And we found that to be much more effective over the last year.
The question of how much you want to interfere naturally comes up. I mean, you were criticized for altering some of the posts because they were too critical of you, and that was probably not one of your finest moments. Let's put it that way. So what do you do with that interference, and what has that taught you about being too hands-on and managing the message?
I think there's a couple of things here. We generally at Reddit want these things to play out, let communities be themselves, let people be themselves, but there are limits to that. In the same way there are limits to free speech in the US, there's limits to what you can do on Reddit. And where we draw the line is when it affects people's personal safety. So no harassing, no bullying. We just expanded our content policy around violent speech, no involuntary sexualization, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of editing comments, that was more of a joke, and it was done in jest. And it wasn't totally received that way, but I think within our community, it wasn't the craziest thing that's ever happened on Reddit.
Let's talk about positioning of ads, because Reddit's a business like any other. It's trying to get the advertisers, the marketers on board, all on the back of very big subscriber numbers. How do you manage to place those ads in the right place and sort of break the dominance of Facebook and Google, which the likes of WPP have argued dominate the space, and all the money is really tipping into those two internet providers?
Well, so there's a couple. Right, there is positioning, and I think any ad business has to wrestle with the trade-off between giving visibility to ads and not cluttering the user experience. And so we haven't actually changed ad placements in quite a while because the website hasn't changed in quite a while. But in the redesigned ads will be in different places, and we'll test what performs the best, just like anybody would. But I think what's really important is getting the targeting right. And the reason Facebook and Google have such a dominant position in the marketplace is because they've gotten really good at targeting. And that's a blessing and a curse, of course, right? They know a lot about their users, and they can give you a targeted, more relevant ad. And on Reddit, we have a similar strategy, but it's a different set of data, right? Because on Reddit, people come and they talk about their interests and their passions. So it's an orthogonal set of data we have, and hopefully we can create that connection between an advertiser and a customer on Reddit in a healthy way. And what's one of the fun things about advertising on Reddit is that the ads are much more conversational, right? For an advertiser, in most places in the world, whether it's online or off, you're basically shouting your message, right? As loud as you can and as many times as you can so that people hear it. And on Reddit, it's much more conversational. And so a lot of our ads on Reddit are actually more questions, right? Hey, Reddit community, what do you think about this? Hey, Reddit community, we need help with this. And so that's why we see engagement on our ads measured in minutes, tens of minutes sometimes, instead of just seconds. And that's even though it's an ad, it feels more collaborative between the customer and the advertiser.
So what do you make of the challenge of trying to track how relevant the ads have been for some of the users? I mean, if you look at Facebook, even though the videos might play and people are not necessarily watching them or there's no sound, so how do you sort of track the interaction that's taken place, and why is it different on Reddit versus, say, on a Facebook?
Well, I think with that sort of kind of tracking and measuring, like, is this ad effective? The industry tends to, I think, kind of self-heal and evolve, right? Video ads have changed, and it creates all these questions that we just didn't really have to consider before, which is like, what is a view? What counts and what doesn't? And I think that's really just almost a negotiation between the platform and the advertiser of making sure that they're getting their money's worth.
Do you want to talk to demographics? Because we had a look at the slide and then look in the feel of the website, but who exactly are you targeting, and why is that relevant to the redesign?
So we're targeting, Reddit has a very broad user base, and so our biggest demo is of course people in their 20s, but really pushing into the 30s, because we pick people up in college, and when they get their first jobs and they're super bored at work, and then we just keep them. And so our user base is actually kind of expanding on both sides in terms of age. And then in terms of content, Reddit gets broader and broader every day. So we started with just one community. It was just one big pile of links. And that's, but now we have many thousands of communities that cover pretty much every topic, and it's not just links. You've got images and video and text. Actually, the majority of content on Reddit is text hosted by us. And so as the breadth of our communities increases, so does the breadth of our user base. And so now you've got huge sports communities, you've got huge communities dedicated to women's issues, you've got communities for support and relationship advice, and of course the news and politics and cat pictures and all sorts of stuff. So with it just comes more and more interesting people.
I know it's early days in terms of getting back into the game and redesigning Reddit, but if you consider what's happened with other social media companies, it's not just been enough to create a social media company. You need to think about the next strategy, the next platform, whether it's an Instagram or dealing with the challenge of a Snap. How do you keep pace with the changes and keep giving your users something new other than just a redesigned page?
Well, so the funny thing is, product development at Reddit is actually very easy, because just about everything we build, our users are already doing. And so, for example, we've got profile pages. It's a new kind of set of features we're rolling out so people can have a home on Reddit as a place to put their content. Because what we see is our users they basically host their content elsewhere on the internet and then only submit it to Reddit. And they just have to jump through all these steps just to post on Reddit. So we try to make that easier. Some of the interesting stuff we're doing later this year around events, right? We have users who come to Reddit for sports or for TV shows, these kind of, or AMAs, right? Our big interviews, where these events that happen in a future time. And so users create a pre-game thread, a during game thread, or a post-game thread, or the same thing for TV shows, pre-episode, during the episode, after the episode. Just taking those things that users are doing and building it in and making it a first-class feature. So for us, we just follow our users, because we figure if we can take that difficult thing that millions of people are already doing and making it 2-3 times easier, then even more people will do it and get more enjoyment out of it.
If you want to follow the users, does that mean you have to march with them down the path of augmented reality, virtual reality, the Internet of Things?
Well, we just launched video, so maybe we're a few steps behind. But I think of there's content and there's content types. And so we want to have the best content on the internet. And I think in many respects, we actually do have some of the best, most interesting content on the internet. And in order to do that, you have to support every content type. So whether it's text or images or video or some future VR, AR wonderland, hopefully we'll be there every step of the way.
Just to wrap up on timing, what's the speed of execution? How quickly do you need to move when you've got an industry now where life cycles are very, very short?
I mean, fast. The answer is fast. Now, Reddit's still a small company. We're about 250 people, but we've been hiring quickly. I think we started the year around 140. And we are basically this year trying to do everything at once, because we need to catch up as quickly as we can and then start doing really innovative things. So we're not doing just the redesign, right? We've got the redesign, we've got video, we've got these new profile pages, we've got all sorts of wonderful stuff, these relevancy algorithms, and all of these things shipping, and we've been hard at work all year. And so in some respects, you can say, hey, is it wise to try to do everything at once? But my feeling is, yes, it feels like we're doing a lot of things and scattered all over the place, but it's really all in service of our main goal, which is make Reddit welcoming, right? Have people come to Reddit and immediately be able to find their home and find their sense of community.
And when will users really notice a difference on the web?
Well, so there's been lots of little shipments over the year, but I think the big one will be the redesign. And so that's in active testing right now with real users. And I hope to get it launched in Q1, like really, really launched. But the devil is always in the details, so we can go a little bit faster if the community is happy with it and we get all the features done. But we'll take our time if we need to make sure that it lands well and it meets the needs of our users.
So what comes first, tax reform in the States or the launch of your website? For the relaunch?
That's an easy question. We will be done in Q1. Tax reform, I'm not holding my breath.
Thank you very much for your time. You're going to be taking a Q&A session just outside of Center Stage in a few minutes' time on the concourse. If anyone has any follow-up questions, they can catch up with you there. Thank you so much. Steve Huffman, co-founder and CEO of Reddit.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
That was great.